ability is to protect water quality. And ultimately, what we're expected to do is confirm that whatever is done at the surface actually over time will not lead to more significant water quality problems. And first encountered groundwater data over using existing water supply wells and trend monitoring allow identification of issues if some of these issues serve that they are not protective of water quality at the earliest possible time, so that if additional measures are needed or we need to modify those measures can be implemented to actually minimize the impact on beneficial uses, because we don't want our practices of today to create the legacy problems of tomorrow. We need some method to verify that. We certainly, I think the AR application over removal is a great idea, but we need to understand how that performs and how it's protective of water quality in different standards. And while Dr. Burt mentioned that it's not a proxy, it is a proxy for what it does for groundwater monitoring. Ultimately, if we don't have monitoring data in the groundwater, we don't know whether the ultimate requirements of our order, and that is the protection of groundwater quality, is being achieved. And we can achieve that much better with looking at a limited number of sites, carefully controlled situations where the cropping patterns have not changed recently, where perhaps the irrigation patterns haven't changed recently, to understand how these perform. Then we minimize those impacts of lag time. We don't do it where groundwater's 200 or 300 feet deep. We do it where we would expect a response to happen within a reasonable amount of time.
And I know the time's gone off, but I see you've asked for more. I just encourage you to
I'll hurry up.
finish up quickly. And just for the people who don't understand why we actually have folks from the regional board speaking to us here, it's they can't talk to all 5 of us at once either.
I'll just
they?
skip through this.
No, they can't.
The use of
Maybe they
the AR ratio in lieu of first encounter groundwater is problematic because, again, it does not give us a measure to actually verify compliance with the order. And as we found in the Agua decision, if we don't have that, when we go to court, we're likely to have problems. So we feel that we really do need it. We can monitor first encountered groundwater. We do it all the time. We can identify what the source area for shallow water supply wells are based upon how much recharge, what's the horizontal flow. We can actually look at the area. And you go into an area a little bit more problematic perhaps in the Central Coast, but in the Central Valley where we have fairly large areas of a crop being grown. You know, almonds would be an easy one to go in where you could probably get an entire section that's nothing but
Right.
but almonds.
Just so I understand, your objection is to the blanket across the board statement. You're not suggesting blanket across the board monitoring everywhere.
We absolutely are not suggesting monitoring of every
sense.
farm because that would be outrageously expensive. But we do think we need to do limited monitoring so that we identify what works where, and then when we have the data, we can extrapolate to those unmonitored sites or interpolate to them to understand whether or not the practices they're implementing are actually adequate to protect water quality. If that makes sense.
Sure.
You know, I'm hearing that you're doing some iterative evaluation of these first encounter groundwater strategies at the regional board. You're thinking about its interpretive value, and you're probably saying, you know, that's not very representative. There's too much noise in this scenario, so we're going to quit using that one. But this one over here, we seem to see some response from management to first encounter groundwater. In other words, I'm hearing, you know, you're critically evaluating when you use that tool because of the expense and the potentially confounding factors that the panels elucidate.
And these have to be living programs as you move through. I mean, it's not a, you know, we're not, you know, dictating how these things are done. We're asking the coalitions, in our case, to come up with a program, tell us how you're going to do it. It may be paired with other types of monitoring, perhaps, you know, certain types of vadose monitoring. It's not all just groundwater, but we want to understand what the effect of certain practices are on groundwater quality, because that's how we verify that it's appropriate. Or if we use something like the AR ratio, we need to understand, okay, if you're going to use an AR ratio and it comes out that 1.4 is the number that's out there, we need to know what effect that has on groundwater quality. And we need to understand that as quickly as we can. I don't think we can wait until we actually see it in water supply wells. Because if we wait and there is a problem there that required modification, by the time we see it in water supply wells, we will have created a significant legacy issue adding to the one that we already have.
Right, I mean, I think we all know that, and we all want to avoid that. I think that the issues here are really about when is it useful and when might it not be useful, and the fact that you need information isn't helpful if you're not going to get the information anyway. So I don't think you're actually disagreeing, but I understand the caution that you feel the need to put on the table based on what you heard.
And I also wanted to mention that it was mentioned that, you know, improvement in the AR ratio over time would verify compliance with the order. Actually, I find that a little bit problematic, because entities that are doing very good practices now and their current AR ratio is very good might not see any improvement in their AR ratio and still be protective of water quality. Those that perhaps are not performing very well, or commodities that don't perform very well, that might see significant improvement, is that improvement as good as it needs to be? And they would look as if, you know, if we just use that to verify compliance. So that seemed a little bit problematic, although again, I think that's one of those things, I think the AR ratio could be very useful. We just need to have verification that whatever is chosen actually is
Right, and we
adequate
might have to be
protect
more
water
creative
quality.
about it than we have been in other contexts, because this is a different context.
Well, and what goes into improvement of an AR ratio? I mean, it's research based on what's left over in the soil and the water, what the plant uptakes. So that's evolving as well.
No, I agree. This has to be a living program in all aspects to understand, you know, how we move forward in this program and protect water quality. And what steps do farmers need to take, recognizing that we don't want it to be any more than it needs to be. But at the same token, we have a lot of people that rely upon groundwater quality, particularly in the Central Valley where I'm from. We need to make sure that we protect that resource so that it's suitable for use as a domestic supply.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bill Thomas, South San Joaquin Water Quality Coalition.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. We think that this expert panel report in its modified form is now a very useful tool to you as you consider these programs that come before you. All the detail isn't worked out, of course, in these. Lots left for you once we get to making it a program. Certainly the AR ratio is a lot better than what some of the orders now say on calculating mass balance at every nitrogen molecule into the soil. That's impossible for everyone, including the expert panel. Now, that doesn't mean the AR ratio is ready to hit the street yet, I think. Quite a few questions on how growers would deal with the denominators, of how much nitrogen is sequestered, et cetera. But I think this is something worth building upon. A second point, well, let me add one thing. When you're considering comparing that to the mass balance, a very good review of that is on page 21 and 22 of the panel's report. Next point, we certainly concur that we shouldn't be monitoring and therefore regulating first encountered groundwater. It's a convenient tool in some places, but we don't see it fit this, and that discussion's on page 39, and worth a read. The issue of weaving in irrigation, which we all know is a major factor here, isn't a piece yet of the orders that are coming before you, and that's going to take some real head scratch. We understand its importance, but here, this is a new element. And as we learn from this report and try to improve the orders that are out there, we certainly have to keep in mind we need to have these legally defensible, certainly to meet the basin plan standards over a reasonable time, as well as whatever will become of your clarifications yet to be had for the anti-dig program for groundwater. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Claire Weinman, President, Grower Shipper Association of San Luis Obispo.
Hi, good evening. My name is Claire Weinman, and I'm the president of the Grower Shipper Association of Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties. We represent over 160 diverse growers, shippers, farm labor contractors, and supporting agribusinesses. Water is currently the association's top priority. The association has participated throughout the panel's process, and we've worked with our water committee to review the questions, the first draft, and the final recommendations. I've traveled here today along with several of my members to speak in support of the panel's process, conclusions, and recommendations to the State Water Board. We further urge you to provide direction to staff to work towards implementing the recommendations of the expert panel. The panel members are each experts in their fields. They have the diverse experience needed to thoughtfully address the technical complexities of the irrigated lands regulatory program. They carefully considered very extensive public comments and their own expertise in responding to the questions posed by the State Board. We ask you to take steps today and in the future to incorporate these recommendations into a future irrigated lands regulatory program that will better accomplish our mutual goal of protecting water quality. In terms of some of the specific recommendations developed by the panel, we strongly support the establishment of coalitions to serve as the intermediary body between farmers and the regional boards. We're currently in the throes of the nitrogen reporting due October 1st. And it's painful. It is a painful process. I hope to share some of these examples with you of how things are going with the current nitrogen reporting requirement to reinforce how what the expert panel is proposing would be much more useful. Individual nitrogen reporting has proven to be a very difficult requirement to comply with. To date, we've hosted 3 workshops in the past 3 months. It's taken weeks and weeks to move forward with that process and to fit that information into the structure on the reporting form. The difficulties that we've encountered illuminates the need for the proposed coalition-based aggregation and the inconsistencies in what's being individually reported to the Water Board. We continue to be concerned that the current regulatory approach will not produce the desired outcome and that it's diverting resources from implementing practices that will improve water quality. We hope that the Water Board will incorporate the panel's recommendations to improve the program. At a minimum, we look to see these improvements in the Central Coast Region 3 Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program in 2017, if not sooner, although the if sooner would definitely be preferable. Furthermore, we recognize that reviewing trends in aggregated, multi-year nitrogen applied to remove ratios will likely be more orderly and useful as a regulatory mechanism than trying to sort through the current multivariate reporting system. I can go into some of those details, but in the interest of time, I think I'll just say that there's a lot of different factors that is making the information that I'm seeing my members reporting being completely all over the board and not useful. In
All right,
conclu-
now is not the time. We're going to have a conversation about that
Yes.
somewhere else.
Yeah, and again, we just wanted to speak in support of the recommendations of the panel and ask the state board to move forward with these recommendations.
Thank you very much. Abby Taylor Silva, grower shipper as well.
Good evening. Abby Taylor Silva with the Grower Shipper Association of Central California. I wanted to first thank the expert panel members. I think they've done a very good and diligent job. I've sat through many of their meetings, and I just really appreciate the time they put forward to bring you this report. Overall, we agree and appreciate very much the panel's recommendation, and specifically the 8 key elements of a regulatory program. First off, establishing coalitions. I've stood in front of you before just speaking about the importance of coalitions and how much we both want to see coalitions as tools for growers in our region. We think they're also going to be meaningful mechanisms to also improve water quality for the region. We're already starting to see great benefit from the Central Coast Groundwater Coalition. Even though I'm a board member, it's a little bit silly for me to get up here and say that, but I think that that coalition has been able to do a lot. We've sampled 1,100 wells in a year, not even a year. We've done a lot of good work with regional board staff to make their databases stronger, and we've done a lot of education and outreach to growers. And I think that a widespread coalition could do that and more. Additionally, we appreciate the adoption of the AR ratio and reporting of key values to coalitions. Currently, I am, along with Claire, helping our members that are Tier 2 and Tier 3 according to Region 3 meet their ACF and potentially nitrate reporting requirements, which is a new reporting requirement due this October 1st. It's very complex. There are big concerns by my members about trade secrets as they fill out these forms. And growers don't feel like they're, as they do these forms, really coming up with information that's helpful to them. It's simply filling out a form. It's not helping them farm. Most of my growers really have expressed that to me. And I think I might have shared this with you a year ago, but again, I'm going to tell you the story of my one grower he's an in-house CCA. He works for a company that farms in about 8,000 acres. They have maybe 2,000 blocks they manage, and he has an employee that has working under his management who used to fully spend 80% of his time working with UCCE on trials and BMPs and management. That person, almost all their time now is on reporting for regulatory compliance. He doesn't feel like it's the best use of their time, but that's what they've had to do. Additionally, we really appreciate the educational and outreach component. We also appreciate clearly defining that the developer won't be responsible for proper implementation unless they are implementing, and that plans are going to be imperfect, but they need to be updated over time. We really like that iterative language. That leads to number 4, the creation and implementation of a nitrogen and water plan that is going to be specific to that organization, the operation. Trend monitoring over many years, that again, I'm finding that, and also reporting, although it's 12-month reporting that's going to be viewed over many years. That's something I think our members really crave right now. And targeted research, as you've spoken about. So I too encourage you to accept this report and encourage you to please, if any members of the expert panel or the State Water Board could present this report to Region 3 board members, I think that would be very valuable. Thank you.
Gee, I'm gonna be there, what, day after tomorrow? I will summarize this item on Thursday. There isn't it's 7 o'clock.
I don't
it
know, I
expired.
turned into a pumpkin. Sorry, Carrie. Carrie Fisher, California Farm Bureau Federation.
Good evening, Chairman Marcus and members of the board. I'm going to be really brief in light of the time and my need to go home, and I'm sure everyone else's. But we'd like to thank the expert panel for their work and what they have put together in all the public meetings. We have really appreciated that opportunity. We do have a couple things, concerns, and some things that we saw as positives with the report, so I'm just going to briefly touch on them and then let someone else use some time. So with the pros, we did appreciate the portions about trend monitoring. We do highly support all the comments about coalitions and their usefulness with regard to not only just implementing the programs throughout the state, but in terms of monitoring portions and the reporting portions, and really being the intermediary between the growers and the regional board. And we do like that the report did stress that data would be aggregated over a multi-year period of time, and that also there were certain portions of the report that did stress that for a while at least that the data would be used for informational and educational purposes rather than just being an immediate regulatory and enforcement tool. Some of the concerns we have are more questions and needs for clarification, and the main one that my members did have was how will this actually work in the field? We do have some questions on how will it be feasible in terms of just the AR ratios and the different components of the AR ratio, especially the portion about the nitrogen removed at harvest. As was acknowledged in the report, numerous crops don't have that number readily available, and it will take a lot of time. Maybe that's telling me I need to be quicker. It will take a lot of time and research to get those figures and what happens in the interim, especially we have, you know, as a statewide organization, we run the gamut of commodities, both big and small, and the time it's going to take to get all those figures. And will there be a phase-in period in terms of using the AR ratio, and what do we do?
Yeah, Ms. Fisher, it's not, they weren't asked to give us a regulatory program. They
Right.
were asked to just give us expert advice. We still have to craft the regulatory program
Right,
through
and-
that full-on process. This will just, is meant to inform us.
And there's just questions that our members are coming up with right now is okay, this is a nice report, but what will it mean to a grower in the field, and what will they then have to comply with the regional boards? And so these were questions we wanted to raise now in hopes that there be some clarification and some information on how this will be utilized by you, by the regional boards, or just how it will be used by a
Right,
grower.
and all I'm saying is that's premature. We're not there yet at all. We're just trying to take it in at this point, same way as the rest of you, and then we have to figure that out. Not tonight,
Right,
not,
and I'm not saying that
tomorrow. So
I'm
you're
just saying
flagging
that-
the things we need
Right.
to think about. I'm
Yes.
just telling you, we can't give your growers answers
Oh, and we're not
anytime
expecting
soon.
an answer. It's just
Okay.
our growers can't say we love it or we hate it yet because they don't know, and they just wanted to raise these concerns and questions because it might not be a concern or it might be a big concern. So it was just thoughts of right now that were off the top of their head.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're all just thinking together now. That's what this is. I know we've had a long day, but that's... George Adam, Innovative Produce. What was that?
We ready? Hello, Chair
Please,
Marcus.
hello.
Thank you, and board members for hanging in here.
It's
A lot of it's, pardon me?
It's interesting.
It is interesting.
I'm sorry, I'm an
And,
extrovert, so I have energy at the end of the day. Sorry.
Most of it's been said, and I'm going to cut everything out that has been. So anyway, I had a question of Dr. Burt as far as the volatilization of N in high temperatures of product. Is that a factor, or is that not a factor? I mean, I love the whole rest of the report, but I have to ask you something, but I guess that would be something that you would normalize over time, or? Yeah. Anyway, I'm totally in favor of the AR reporting, and one of the biggest reasons is human capital. I mean, when growers are out there having to make decisions on, you know, which technologies are relevant to crops. I mean, back in the 1990s, we developed a drip tape retrieval system, and if growers aren't out there developing those types of things, then and you're wasting a lot of time by reporting and doing all these crunching numbers that really don't mean anything, then it really consumes the problem, and you won't have advances made. And you have the time of the year the crops in a given growing district, you've got market conditions, you've got varieties, there's thousands of varieties. They all react differently to nitrate. You need to be tracking that so you can minimize your applications. Water quality and availability, especially in a drought like this, you're managing all those resources to try to maximize everything that you can, and then the quality demands of the marketplace. So those are all things that I think are completely overlooked besides the temperature, the weather. I mean, I don't think any of those things were mentioned today, and those you'd have to have a pretty huge regression analysis to take that all into consideration if you're going to do a mass balance approach, and it just would not work. And so I think that I really think that the expert panel did a great job in really trying to get a handle on this complex problem, because it is a human capital issue. There's only so much human capital in our industry to address complexities, and they need to be focused on those rather than monitoring. Something that was mentioned relative to Region 5 is we have to report in Region 3 all of our primary irrigation wells, and I would think that would be enough. They're going to be looking at that anyway, so I guess they don't have to do that or something. But anyway, I also want to accentuate the fact that I believe that high nitrate waters need to be applied to crops, because that's one of the best ways to remediate existing, and I've said this 1,000 times, but anyway, that's about it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next, I have Randy Scherer from Scherer Brothers Farms. Oh, darn. All right, Casey Kramer, Kings River Water Quality Coalition. Hi, Casey.
Good evening, Felicia, members of the board. Casey Kramer, Kings River Water Quality Coalition. I first want to state that the work that these guys did can't properly be summarized in a 40-page report. Sat through many of their sessions. They were very thoughtful in everything they did. I gave them suggestions. Sometimes they took them, sometimes they disregarded them. But there were sound reasons behind each one of their recommendations, and so I want to commend them for doing that in such a short period of time. We do have concerns as this program moves forward, the regulatory part of this. We're committed to working with both you and the regional boards on implementing whatever comes out of this panel in a way that is practical for growers, and so we'll stay engaged in that process and hope that many of the recommendations that are in this report bear fruit. Just one more point I want to mention is that Darren Polhemus did an outstanding job of both convening this panel, coordinating the sessions, helping the the panel members with the process, and I think he deserves a big praise for that work as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for that. You can say that again. Do that again. That was nice. Next, Omar Carrillo from the Community Water Center.
Haven't been here most of the day. It's like winning the lottery when you call my name. You're like, yeah, all right.
We appreciate you staying all day, actually. Every meeting's better that you're at, Omar.
We're so here on behalf of Community Water Center, Leadership Council, and Clean Water Action. The reason for this group and for the work that we're doing is communities are impacted by nitrate. There's the health, there's the environmental issues. And so, in moving forward from here, we saw some good things and we saw some, we also saw some bad things. So I'll start out with the good stuff. I mean, really our organizations have argued all along the way that nitrate application data needs to be reported in the irrigated lands. That's good. There was also the conversation of the nitrogen balances, so like section 3.4 the AR recommendation. This actually has been brought up before. There was another task force, nitrogen balance task force, so there's some other task force that actually has brought up the same recommendation, but it should not be done in lieu of it should not be done in lieu of testing shallow water. And further, on the positive stuff, you know, you have the farmer involvement, so it's section 4.3.3. It's talking about the connection between fertilizer and also in kind of treating that as a pesticide. And there's, we actually agree with this. It's actually a step forward. So that's good stuff. What I'll mention is that the reality of it is that if we don't manage, we can't measure. And if we don't measure, we can't monitor. We need to have all information, shallow water, first encountered water, all that needs to be part of the analysis. We can't go without that. The section 3.3 on the concept of vulnerability, this section, it was just kind of like very complicated. I don't think it really kind of got across to actually providing a solution. In fact, just reading it made my head hurt. I mean, I feel like we need to look at this section a little bit further outside of this report so it can be properly addressed in the proper fashion. And with that said, you know, we appreciate the continued efforts on this and the efforts by this group. So there were some positive things, but also some continued work that needs to get done here. And, you know, we definitely some concrete solutions moving forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Next, Ben Pitterly and Dr. Mark Cram. These are the folks who asked for a longer period of time.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Ben Pitterly, and I am the Watershed and Marine Program Director with Santa Barbara Channel Keeper. I'm speaking here tonight on behalf of Channel Keeper, but also a number of other organizations, including the Otter Project and the California Coast Keeper Alliance and its 12-member water keepers. First, just thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight and for the allotted time. And then in the interest of time, I'm going to cut this a little bit short and just say that while we do agree with some of the panel's final recommendations, I will say that in general, our groups would like to express our disappointment. We believe that the panel's document, unfortunately, may not have risen to all of the challenges with which it was tasked, mainly to identify and provide the state board with real solution-oriented recommendations for many of the real challenges that the state and the regional boards face in addressing their agricultural pollution problems. In an effort to offer positive solutions, the Otter Project has taken the step of engaging a highly credentialed and widely published and respected consultant, Dr. Mark Cram, in analyzing this report and providing recommendations. Dr. Cram earned his PhD in Environmental Science and Management from the University of California at Santa Barbara. He has over 30 years of experience using innovative environmental assessment techniques, has authored articles, national standards, and book chapters on the subject, and he has taught graduate level courses on related topics. Dr. Cram is an internationally recognized expert in site characterization and remediation. He's an active member of the National Groundwater Association, American Society of Testing and Materials, and the Interstate Technology Regulatory Council, and he's currently preparing national guidance for environmental characterization applications. Dr. Cram is the recipient of the National Groundwater Association's prestigious Technology Award, and he's received the 2014 ASTM Technical Editors Award. Our organizations do endorse Dr. Cram's analysis, and just with that said, I'll pass it over to Dr. Cram. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to keep this brief as well because I know everybody's been here a long time. I got up at 4 o'clock this morning, so I want to thank everybody. I greatly appreciate what the esteemed members of the agricultural panel put together. I do agree with many of the recommendations. It's an honor to work with you to try to resolve one of the most complex and challenging issues of our time. I think we all can agree that food production is critical to our survival and that this must be performed in a way that does not harm our water supplies, the environment, or ecological resources. Let me begin by articulating a vision for the future. It's my hope that a combination of peer pressure, education, and technology will result in superior environmental outcomes. I envision opportunities whereby funds will be made available to help the grower community utilize state-of-the-science technologies that minimize reporting requirements. I envision a time in the not-too-distant future where we learn a tremendous amount through direct observation and to be able to verify the reduction in nitrate loads to our precious water supplies. Ultimately, it is our hope that this collaborative model will serve communities not just in California, but on a global scale. In fact, some of my colleagues in New Zealand are currently very interested in the outcome of this process as they are facing very similar challenges. As you can tell by our submitted evaluation of the expert panel's recommendation, while we agree with key components such as education and tracking and reducing the amount of nitrogen amendment used relative to the amount required for each crop and irrigation phase, there are some key elements that we believe are missing. For instance, with respect to vulnerability of groundwater and surface water and verification of management practice effectiveness, the panel did not offer specific methods or metrics that can be implemented through the ILRP, and instead concluded that to implement such measures could potentially be futile. There are many affordable technical solutions that could have been considered. Most of the concepts we've introduced are not new, and they can be directly applicable to the situation at hand. I believe I speak for many in this room. We've heard some similar comments when I say that we can't appropriately manage what we aren't measuring. The expert panel maintains that solute concentrations are not directly related to agricultural practices, and therefore recommends minimal and infrequent measurement of solute nitrate concentrations. And they quote the distinguished Dr. Leite, who has argued that nitrate concentration measurement in soil water can be misleading. However, this is most often the case when the monitoring campaign is designed to be a point-in-time snapshot type of campaign, which does not lend itself to understanding dynamics and key relationships. In contrast, continuous monitoring, which is now becoming a little bit more common in the hazardous waste arena and is leading to many revelations that are very helpful at the regulatory level, over time and space can provide a far more detailed understanding of cause and effect, particularly when this information is coupled with growing practices and the recommended application to removal ratio estimates for specific areas. This would be particularly true for monitoring of nitrate and surface discharge points in real time, which is now possible, where intuitive visualization would immediately point to areas where nitrate-laden runoff is occurring. At the moment, it's occurring. Since the expert panel did not really endorse available soil and water measurement technologies and monitoring and restoration methodologies, we felt that it was important to consider candidates for the record, as we maintain that these techniques will help us achieve the collective vision, again, to reduce the amount of nitrate pollution while minimizing the burden for reporting to the grower community. In the limited time I have remaining, I won't be able to go through all these technical details, but I'd like to focus on a few that are available, affordable, and yield information or outcomes with very specific objectives that I think will be helpful to the regulatory community. Several leading candidates include the following: direct push sensor-based probe systems for the determination of soil, hydraulic, and water quality properties, and to design and install long-term monitoring networks that make sense. Soil moisture and salinity profiling to help estimate nitrate solute infiltration rates. Mass movement or flux, something that Dr. Leite endorses as well, in groundwater, to determine the load distribution and mass discharge over time in a oriented perpendicular to the flow. When you have a transect perpendicular to flow and you look at that over time, you actually get a scalar value, grams per day or what have you. And that's a nice metric to evaluate whether or not we're making improvement. There are many new sensors that are available too. For groundwater level, obviously, to determine the flow direction and velocity, and even for nitrate. And that can help us get that mobility value and the discharge to help identify upgradient sources and evaluate remediation performance over time and space. Sensors for soil moisture content and salinity dynamics to evaluate movement and leaching rates in soil, particularly just below the root zone, can be very helpful as well. In terms of runoff, sensors for this runoff can be played right along with some of these concepts you've probably heard tonight already, where you can place these at specific discharge points. And again, generate a map in real time. You can access it from your cell phone and see where a hot spot exists. And then work your way back up the watershed and identify that. I think if we implement what I read in the report, there's a lag that might be associated with just starting at the receiving water and then trying to work your way back up. You may miss some of these source areas, particularly over time. There are a lot of inexpensive but effective passive runoff nitrate treatment cells also, such as those that are being implemented by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They just dig a trench and they place simple wood chips in the subsurface, and they can route the tile water right to that, and it treats it. Some places they've reported up to 90% of the material has been removed from that. This might even be a viable option when you see hot spots in the groundwater, so you can do pump and treat through those types of zones. A lot of this can be automated, a lot of this can be intuitive, it could be through the web, and I think that it would be worthwhile considering some of these things. So you can look at nitrate distributions over time and space, infiltration, etc. As mentioned in our report, the good news is that standards and protocol have already been derived for the majority of these technologies and approaches. As such, implementation by competent service providers can be relatively straightforward. Furthermore, some of the sensors are very reasonably priced. In some cases, sensors can be deployed at no cost, so expenses incurred are only for the services while in use. In conclusion, while it is acknowledged that complexities are significant, we believe that the expert panel did not entirely meet the expectations of the regulatory community, as cost-effective methodologies exist to evaluate the current situation, changes over time and space, to help identify possible source areas requiring attention, and to determine remediation effectiveness. We also maintain that monitoring is essential and that well-established and newer technologies, as well as programs and standards already well developed for other industries, can be leveraged to both meet critical needs and to help minimize the burden to the grower community. The expert panel is correct in that there will be varying residence time lags, but the sooner we begin developing site-specific relationships for cause and effect, and the sooner we deploy a monitoring network to evaluate improvements over time and space, the sooner we'll be able to determine the most effective and pragmatic ways forward. An appropriate pathway forward would include pollution prevention by nitrate amendment reduction as recommended, as well as characterization, monitoring, and restoration. As such, we do not agree that appropriate monitoring for cause and effect relationships, remediation design, and metrics-based improvement tracking would be futile. Therefore, status quo or a slight modification of status quo would not be supported by the vast majority of entities concerned about the future of this region. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this process. If interested, I can make myself available to help develop ideas and tell you what some of these things cost, etc.
Great, thank you. Questions?
One question. Clay mentioned, who's with Region 5, mentioned that they have a monitoring approach that they require, but it's not, everyone doesn't do it. It's much more selective.
Right.
I couldn't tell from your presentation as to whether you support that approach, being selective rather than requiring every farm to report, or what?
It's a great question. Obviously, we have to be pragmatic about this. It's going to cost money, right? And it's going to cost time, and it's going to require education. It's going to require a lot, maybe even some research to do some of the connections as well. I would advocate early on that we look at the hot spots that we know about and focus on that. And then later on, if warranted, we would expand the scale of that. If we see that it's cost effective, or if a coalition could purchase and get economies of scale and bring some of those costs down, or maybe be supplemented by state funding or some other mechanisms to make it reasonable, then sure. I'm talking about groundwater, okay? But again, when you look at a transect with respect to the flux or the discharge, it tells you what's going on up gradient, right? So you can actually cover multiple fields with the same kind of monitoring system. When you talk about surface water discharge, some of these sensors are going to be $100 to $200 a pop, including telemetry. So in some of those cases, I would say, again, maybe start with the receiving waters, work your way up, but then keep a dedicated system as a Sentry network. But it's a great question.
Right, so there's room for pilot projects of
Absolutely.
all kinds in that. Yeah, I spent a lot of time on plumes in the more Superfund
Right.
context, and you can do that. There's a lot of money involved in those, and a lot of money gets put into doing that, but it's definitely doable. And part of our focus, and people haven't talked about it that much, I suspect we will, is that we have the